Welcome. I am Carol Vinci, and if you stumbled into this as the first session, I wanted to alert you to October is ADHD Awareness Month. I am doing one session a day to raise awareness and to address some of the issues that we sometimes struggle with, being sometimes totally unaware, unsupported, and just overwhelmed. This is a very emotional subject for me to discuss. I seriously considered moving it down later in the month, but because it is so important to our effectiveness, our health, and in some cases our sanity, I thought it would be cowardice of me not to address it up front. I pose the question, are you living in a constant state of fear, of being discovered with conditions that you may or may not be aware of? I jokingly say when I first discovered, self diagnosed, I guess is the best way to describe it, that I was ADD, attention deficit disorder, that I would have admitted to killing somebody before I would have admitted to having ADD. Because the most public knowledge that exists is that it's all about defects and deficits. And I certainly wasn't willing or able to admit to any of those characteristics. How about shame? The struggles that we deal with are just overwhelming because some of the simplest activities that our friends and neighbors have absolutely no difficulty with and seem easy are huge struggles for us. And we feel insufficient because of that ongoing challenge. The next one is overwhelm. I was actually very successful in my corporate career, but without realizing it, what I needed to do was isolate over the weekend to recharge my batteries so I could show up Monday morning appearing normal, or at least the best version of normal that I could muster. I lived in isolation. I lived with not fitting in with my peers, and it was lonely. And looking at these three characteristics, had a significant negative impact on my health. Despite the fact that when I turned 40, the internist I had been seeing for the prior 15 years gave me permission to lie about my age. He said in all the years he had been treating me, the statistics that showed up in my blood work and my blood pressure and everything that the traditional medical practice looked at hadn't changed in those 15 years. So he thought that I should take the advantage of lying about my age. My adrenals were not functioning. And the impact that had on my system is, and this was something that I never knew, but your adrenals control the muscles in your hips. And when your hips are not aligned with your knees, if you're a downhill skier, the solution, if you insist on downhill skiing, is at the end of a day, you go to the lodge and take Tylenol or Aleve and sit with ice packs on your knees. And I lived in Manhattan at the time and had access to Billie Jean King's knee surgeon, the New York Jets knee person. And of course, they look at the 6 inches around the knees and they declared that my knees were fine. But the downside of specialization. My cortisol levels were always dangerously out of sync. Again, sought treatment for that. Nobody connected the dots. My sleep apnea was only diagnosed recently. And, a friend of mine at the time said, "You have the worst sleep habits that I've ever known." Yet none of the doctors ever asked about that in my regular treatments that I sought yearly and that I came out of with flying colors. I have to admit that I do harbor some anger toward the medical profession for not connecting these dots. There were many signs that there was something out of the ordinary for me in all aspects of my life. My physical being, my ability to sleep through a night. My body was smart enough that at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the middle of my sleep pattern, I would wake up because my brain was sleep deprived, which is what happens with sleep apnea. So I would wake up, read for an hour, then go back to sleep for another 2.5 hours. That was my normal sleep routine. You think any doctor asked about sleep patterns? No. In business, there were signs, but again, no one was prepared to address the subject head on. In the middle of my sales career, I was sent off to a 2-week class because of what my manager said was a premature midlife crisis in my 30s, for Pete's sake. Nobody was prepared to address what the symptoms or signs or distractions in my performance of my job were, because I always made my numbers. I always overachieved in any of the numerics that were presented in sales quotas or other activities. About 10 years later, one of my colleagues said to me, "Your anger is so close to the surface that I'm always afraid that you were about to explode." That was almost 40 years ago. I clearly remembered his comment, but I also didn't hear what he was saying. I didn't take the time to think about it. I didn't ask him to sit down and have a coffee with me to discuss the issue, and I never sought therapy. I just moved on. Next question, what is your schedule for next week so we can schedule a customer appointment? Never gave it any serious thought at the time. I don't want to leave you with doom and gloom on this subject, but I do think that it's important that you go back and think about your past behaviors and how they may be hidden signs of what is going on that is not terminal, but certainly uncomfortable and disruptive in ways that affect your health, your business performance, and most likely your personal relationships. If you were living in a time capsule for the last 2 or 3 years and you were recently reintroduced to me, you probably would be saying, "Who is this person?" Certainly not anybody I recognize from past behaviors. You probably are in complete shock that I am now in a position, thankfully, to be able to discuss some of this and to help with your recovery if you choose to take the action. I resisted for decades. I was given all of the pointers and signs, but I had no interest in the time. I was so focused at appearing normal. I often describe this process that I've been going through for the last 6 or 7 years as peeling an onion. Every time you remove one layer, there's something new inside. It can be painful, it can be exhilarating. There are some things that I have now added to my life. I now meditate. Again, something that I couldn't conceive of myself doing. Uh, it's almost the tangential comment here is I tried playing golf in the early 80s and didn't have the patience for such a slow game. Well, 20 years later, I discovered that I could develop the patience. So I am developing the patience for meditation. I have to say, the program I'm part of is a 30-minute meditation, and I can't last the 30 minutes. So I journal, and all of the creative thoughts that have come up during the initial part of the meditation are now written down and documented so that I can go back to them and use them as life evolves. But I do, on a 5-day-a-week basis, show up for my meditation. I started doing yoga. Again, not something you would have found me doing 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. I had an arm injury, so while the shoulder recovers from replacement surgery, I have been away from it, but I actually found it energizing, and I'm looking forward to going back to it. None of this journey is instant soup. I don't want to discourage you from starting the journey, but I do need to encourage you to be patient and persistent with yourself. The results are rewarding, amazing, baffling, any of those superlatives that you'd like to add. But in fact, the results are coming, and hopefully you will find this journey rewarding. I have to say that I would never have been able to start this journey without the support of some close friends who provide encouragement, motivation, attaboys to keep me going and to not let me get stuck. So I thank all of the people who have been part of this journey. I ask for your comments. If you have found any of this helpful, upsetting, supportive, please comment. And I ask you to subscribe to the channel. As I said, every day I will post a new session, each with a different topic, and I hope that you find them helpful. I thank you for your time.